Now, there's a recent story of a 29-year-old woman that penned an open letter to the CEO of Yelp. Now, in that letter, she explained how she could not even afford food after paying rent for her San Francisco apartment. She said she had a 10-pound bag of rice. She hadn't bought groceries, not because she's lazy or anything like that, but because she couldn't afford it. Now, what's Fox News going to do? Fox News is going to call her lazy. Watch.
All right, so first of all, what made you react to her rant about not being able to afford anything and complaining about her employer?
I think it was, I mean, the whole thing kind of sounded very Dickens-esque. Like, I am so poor, oh my God, I'm so poor. But when I got to the end and I realized that she had included a link to her Venmo account and a PayPal account, asking for people to help her to pay rent because she had gotten fired, I just sat there and was like, you have got to be kidding me that this girl is legitimately asking people to pay her rent for her in San Francisco.
There's only 4 or 5 year age difference between the two of you, both of the same millennial generation. We hear a lot of complaints about millennials and their sense of entitlement. In this case, you're saying she's whining. Is there a problem that you're identifying within your own generation?
I mean, it becomes kind of prevalent because I think there are a lot of stories that get out there, because I think it's one of those situations of, like, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, obviously. So the more you hear about it, you know, the more it sounds like it is very prevalent. On the flip side, since this article went viral, I've received an enormous amount of emails from people like my
what?
generation.
What are people saying to you?
Surprisingly, and I don't know why exactly, I have gotten so many emails thanking me, basically for saying, like, you know, for sticking up for people that actually do work hard, and people our age that actually pull their weight and, you know, have 2 jobs, are getting their master's, are finishing their degree, are working in a restaurant, you know, took a construction job because they couldn't get an engineering job out of college. There's a lot of people saying thank you for sticking up for us, and I think that's the big situation, is there are way more people in our generation that actually are, you know, busting their butt to get where they want to be and what they need. They just don't get the press that someone like this girl was getting.
Is there a misunderstanding that's happening with this generation? I mean, you're saying the problem isn't with her former employer, Yelp, or the minimum wage that she was getting paid. You say it's this girl's delusion of what her life should be. Is there an understanding when kids are graduating from college right now that they're entitled to a job, entitled to a nice apartment? And by the way, you're saying, where were the roommates? You're paying 80% of your income to rent. Why would you take that on?
How dare you think you're entitled to earn a living, to buy groceries? How delusional are you to think that you're going to pay your rent and buy groceries with only 1 job? I mean, or without roommates. Why don't you have roommates? Why don't you have roommates? Well, if you're living in a 1-bedroom apartment or a studio apartment, you're not going to have room for roommates. Rent is that high for a studio. Not only that, but she also said, look, you have this expectation, you think you're entitled to a job after you go and spend thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars on a degree, which is essentially now the equivalent of a high school diploma in today's job market. How dare you? What the hell are you? What are you supposed to do? What else are you supposed to do? If you're on food stamps, you're apparently a lazy taker, right? And if you work a job where your pay sucks and you actually want to voice your frustration about it, well, you're considered entitled. All right. Seriously, you can't win with these people. Now, let's continue.
I agree. I am for a minimum wage that is livable, without a doubt. But what I think people forget was that she had full health benefits, which easily $25,000 a year, which tax on to what she was making. And again, she had a 1-bedroom apartment or studio in San Francisco, arguably one of the most expensive cities in the country. And she didn't have a second job, she didn't have any supplemental income, and she willingly agreed to the salary that they promised her. This wasn't they promised her X, she got Y, and she was, you know, thrown off because she made all these plans. Clearly, you knew what you were going to be getting paid, you made these financial decisions on your own, and now you're expecting a company to finance you, not for the work you're doing, but for the lifestyle you chose, the apartment you chose, the city you chose to live in, and only having one job. That's not a company's responsibility, in my opinion.
And Stephanie, as you point out, we seem to talk more about the bad people in the millennial generation rather than those that are actually out there working hard like yourself. Stephanie, thanks for joining us and telling us your story this morning.
You made these decisions on your own. And now you're expecting the company to finance you? Not just for your work, but for your lifestyle. Basically, what are you bitching about? We gave you some fucking bootstraps, stop complaining, and work harder. You actually expect us to finance your food through work? I mean, you're working for us and you expect us to pay you enough for you to survive? Yeah, isn't that the point of having a job? I mean, I thought the whole point of a job is to make it so that if you work, you get paid and you can afford food and a home. It's not as if she's asking for her to, for the company to say, okay, you can have lobster and shrimp and a nice, filet mignon or some shit like that. Red wine every night. That's fucking ridiculous. She's eating out of a 10-pound bag of rice. What do you want her to do? What do you want her to do? Well, apparently, you want her to work harder. You want to get a second job. Well, okay, let's talk about that, right? So she should have another job, right, to be able to afford this. If you can't afford it, you get a second job. Maybe you get a third job. Okay, well, how many hours working the minimum wage does it take to afford housing in California? Well, according to the National Low Income Housing Coalition, it'll take about 92 hours at the federal minimum wage to be able to afford a one-bedroom apartment. Now, you could say, wait a minute, you're in San Francisco, you liberals have already made it a $12 minimum wage, and you just passed a law saying it would be up to $15 an hour. Well, okay, but according to that same report, the wage required to afford a one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco would be equivalent to $31.44 an hour for a 40-hour work week. That is a one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco. That is the equivalent wage that you would need to afford it working 40 hours a week. That's insanity. Look, this isn't a question of bootstraps. It's not even a question of the minimum wage. This is an issue of the housing costs in San Francisco. It's absolutely out of control. You ever wonder why there are so many homeless people in San Francisco? That's the reason. That's the reason. Housing prices are super insane. All right, so now you think, well, okay, well, that's her problem. Maybe she should just move. Well, that's easier said than done. I mean, sure, she could move to a cheaper area and do actually probably better. Fine, in her instance, that would be a solution to her specific problem, but it doesn't solve the overall problem of housing prices being absolutely insane. But of course, the people on Fox News are not really concerned about solving the problem of unaffordable housing in the big cities. And New York has essentially the same problem. No, they're actually much more interested in blaming poor people for not working hard enough to be able to afford the sky-high cost of rent and daring to be able to buy groceries. Fox News for you. It's just another example of Ayn Rand values.